The chickens are coming home to roost for Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. With Mike McCarthy, Mike Zimmer, and Dak Prescott all not under contract for Dallas past the 2024 season, this seems to be the last hoorah for the Cowboys. Let's go ahead and discuss. And what's crack-a-lack? It's your boy Broshmo, just in case you did not know so, and welcome to the Deep Dive series, where I take a look at each and every NFL team and project how they're going to do in 2024. And today I have America's team, allegedly, the Dallas Cowboys. But before we talk about the upcoming season, we got to take a look at how they fared last year. Cowboys opened the year looking dominant with blowout wins against the Giants and the Jets. Unfortunately, during that time period, they did lose Trevon Diggs for the rest of the season to an ACL injury. Then the following week, they would lose their first game of the season to Joshua Dobbs and the Cardinals, which wasn't a pretty look. They did rebound pretty well, though, as they beat the Patriots 38-3. But then they headed to Santa Clara and got annihilated by the 49ers 42-10. The team just looked awful as a whole. However, they did manage to leave the West Coast with the win over the Chargers prior to their bye week. And then following their bye week, they came out and beat the Rams 43-20, then traveled to Philly for a divisional game against the Eagles. The refs were just terrible in this game for honestly both teams, but the Cowboys fell short 28-3. Dallas was now 5-3, and then they went on a 5-game winning streak, outscoring opponents 201-85. And on this winning streak, Deron Bland would make history with his 5th pick six. The Cowboys would get dog-walked by the Bills in Week 15, and then they would lose a close one to the Miami Dolphins thanks to a game-winning field goal. However, they would get back to their winning ways with a 1-point victory over the Detroit Lions that had a very controversial ending. And then they would close the season with another commanding win over the Commanders. See what I did there? Haha, funny. Regardless, the Cowboys finished 12-5 and obtained the number 2 seed, meaning they would have home field advantage through a majority of the playoffs. But apparently that didn't matter to their wild card opponent, the Green Bay Packers, as the Packers would go up 27-7 on the Dallas Cowboys by halftime. The Cowboys did put up a little bit of a fight after that, but ultimately they lost 48-32. Dallas was an absolute powerhouse, both offensively and defensively. They may have had the third easiest schedule in the league, but still they dominated who they needed to dominate, and they had a few close games against some credible competition. This was a great team during the regular season who ended up having their worst game of the season in the playoffs. Real quick, I gotta give a shout out to today's sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I absolutely love Underdog Fantasy because I love football, and now that the football season is far and away, it doesn't mean my betting season has to be, because they do all kinds of sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, esports even. They got you covered, whether that's weekly best ball or my favorite, higher lower on player props. So if you sign up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code BROSHMO, then they will give you a first time deposit up to $250. That's right. That's right. So if you're gonna go and bet with Underdog Fantasy, use promo code BROSHMO, take advantage of this offer, but please bet responsibly and bet within your means. The Cowboys had some notable talent leave via free agency simply because they couldn't afford them. They couldn't pay them what they wanted to be paid, like running back Tony Pollard, center Tyler Biadasz, and defensive end Dorrance Armstrong. But they also chose not to bring back some of the older talent they had, like safety Jerron Kearse and cornerback Stephon Gilmore, who are still free agents. So maybe they end up bringing those guys back because they were actually very solid for him last season. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter what Jerry lost because he was about to go all in this offseason. I guess not, Jerry. This isn't what we thought you meant when you said you were going to go all in this offseason, Jerry. Mr. Jerry Jones, what are we doing here? As this team, they made, we're going to talk about their free agency, the few moves that they made. We're going to talk about the draft, and while it's like they added some good players, I wouldn't say this team got radically better. And I mean, granted, this was a very good team to begin with, but it doesn't feel like that they got really that much better from last season with their biggest free agent acquisition being Eric Kendricks, which it's a good pickup. It is. Someone who's familiar with Mike Zimmer and his scheme. Zimmer, a guy who really tries to sell out when it comes to stopping the run. And we'll talk a little bit more about his scheme. But again, Kendricks, very familiar working with Zimmer in the past. So and he's one of the better linebackers in the league. So it's a good pickup. But then outside of that, it was just kind of re-signing a few guys here and there. Jordan Lewis, he's an adequate slot player. You got Rico Dowdle, who played well last season as the backup to Tony Pollard, but not someone who's you expect to set the league on fire. They added some guys to the backfield in Royce Freeman, who stepped up and played really well when Kyron Williams went down for the Rams last year. But I would say his play was probably on par, at least production-wise, to a Rico Dowdle, and then you get Ezekiel Elliott, you bring him back to Dallas, and he's in the twilight of his career. In terms of what he brings as a runner, I would say he's maybe on par with Dowdle and Freeman, if not a little less, but he brings maybe a little bit more stank as a pass catcher. But this was really nothing special free agency-wise. It wasn't this big haul. It wasn't this all-in everyone was expecting. But let's just go ahead. Let's talk about what they did in the draft. As with their first overall pick, they decide to trade back, get some extra draft capital, and then they land Tyler Guyton, who, I'm going to be honest, man, I kind of assumed that the Cowboys would have went down this route anyway, offensive line-wise, whether it was Graham Barton or one of these tackles, because it was a tackle-rich first round, and he has it in terms of the athletic and physical tools. He's got the movement skills, he's got the play strength, he's got the length. It's just someone who, if you start him early in his career, which the Cowboys will do at left tackle, he's gonna get by on those tools as he develops the remainder of his game. But there was a lot to like about. There's a lot of meat to the bone here when it comes to Tyler Guyton. So I like the pickup. It was a pretty darn good pickup, especially considering Tyron Smith moving on, going to the Jets. And then in the second round, this was low-key probably my favorite pickup because Marshawn Kneeland was a my guy. He was a my guy. I absolutely loved Marshawn Kneeland, someone who is truly going to be a good replacement early on in that rotation for Dorrance Armstrong. Someone who's going to play the run really well. He plays really big, but he's also got some really good straight line explosiveness. And that's going to matter a lot more now that Sam Williams will be out for the remainder of the season with the ACL and MCL tear. So Kneeland, big kudos, my guy. I thought he could have gone at the back end of the first round. You end up getting him in that middle second round area. Great pickup. I thought the Cowboys at this point were knocking it out of the park. And then we go to the third round and they get Cooper Beebe, who for me projected as a guard. Looks like he's gonna probably maybe be the heir apparent at center. I don't know if he starts right away. We'll find out a little bit more about that maybe in training camp. Don't know how they exactly feel about Brock Hoffman, a guy who hasn't seen a ton of snaps in his career, a ton of meaningful snaps, but I really liked him coming out of, I think it was Virginia Tech. So but BB, at least in terms of long-term projection, whether it's at center or at guard, which is where I projected him to play in the NFL. He's just someone who he didn't have the athletic ability to hang at tackle, I think, in the NFL, but someone who was just rock solid, tough run blocker, and just mean mitts, hits hard. Big fan of BB. And then they also snag in the third round Maris Luafau, who feels a lot similar to what they got last season in DeMarvion Overshown. Obviously, Overshown missed all last season with the ACL injury. Just adding some more potential at linebacker. As I feel like the linebacker room is kind of set with a Damone Clark. You got Eric Kendricks, but he's a one-year guy. You have Marquise Bell, who he's lighter. He's more of a safety, but played really well around the box. Linebacker has been getting lighter and lighter in terms of how much they weigh over the past few years. So, like, at the very least, like, I think with Overshown and Luafau, you're kind of rolling the dice on these guys who have length, who have good explosiveness, that play with their hair on fire, and you're kind of hoping maybe one of those guys works out for you in the long term. So not against this pick. Like, I think I had him more of a top of the fourth round type of player, but you get him there at relatively the back end of the third. That's fine. It's a-okay. So, like, day one, day two picks, really good, really solid. And then in the fifth round, they go with Kalen Carson, who I had as a third round player. Like, he's a good fit for Zimmer's scheme, where typically you're going to be seeing a lot of press, whether that's man, whether that's like cover three match. Like, you're going to be seeing a lot of press, and I think he has that in him. He has the athletic ability to be very good at mirroring defenders. You worry a little bit about the size and the physicality when it comes to Carson during the route, but like, because he did have a couple of tough games last season, or rough games. Like, a lot of people go to the Keon Coleman game against Florida State. But he was a good player, and I thought was worth a day two selection. You ended up getting him in the fifth. So, hell yeah, great pickup. Ryan Flournoy was one of my favorite prospects, like just my guy in this class that I liked more in like mid day three, late day three area. That's where you get him. Someone who I think can work inside and out, who tested well, really smooth athlete, someone who went to the Senior Bowl and didn't dominate, but looked like he belonged. And then, honestly, that's more important anyway for these small school prospects coming in, facing better competition, and looking like they belong. And Flournoy was that guy. And someone who offers some after the catch ability. So it gives them more flavor in that wide receiving room, that now you lose Michael Gallup, who went elsewhere in free agency. And I think he ultimately retired. I can't remember, but you add him to Lamb, to Cooks, to you got Tolbert, who you're still hoping to get something out of. Turpin, who's more of this like gadget and role specific type of player that's more of a return man. So I like that addition. I thought that was really good. Nathan Thomas out of Louisiana. Looks like they're going to try to convert him to guard, and I think that's fine. I thought he was a fairly fine tackle. Didn't really see the upside in him. Maybe like a potential high-end backup was probably the ceiling with him, and you move him to guard, and you kind of hide a little bit of whether it's the lack of being this, like, just being a little, not a fluid or quick athlete, someone who's got pretty solid enough play strength, and you move him to guard, which I think that's okay. You get to develop him there. He's a 7th round pick. It kind of is what it is. And then they finish it off with Justin Rogers, who I had as a priority UDFA, but I get why he gets drafted. Size, strength. You lost Jonathan Hankins via free agency. Mozzie Smith didn't have a good rookie season, though a lot of that was like he shedded weight, and I don't know what he's up to now, but like, is he gonna kind of fill in that, like, not that Mike Zimmerman's really gonna have someone playing in the A gap a ton, but someone who has at least that like 0 tech, 1 tech type of size to play around like the nose tackle position. Rodgers offers that, at least in terms of being a space eater at 6'3", 346 pounds. So like, I understand and I get the selection, but I really like what they did in the first 4 rounds. Shoot, you could even go to round 6. I really like it. It was a really good, really solid draft by the Dallas Cowboys. But let's go ahead and let's talk about this coaching staff. So you have Mike McCarthy here as the head coach going into year 5 with 1 more year left on his contract. So you could say it's a kind of a make or break year for McCarthy. So like, what is the standard here? Is it just a little bit of playoff success? Because like, this team's going to have to figure it out, man. And I feel like they're kind of stuck with Mike McCarthy. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, because this team's been a winning team during the regular season under Mike McCarthy. We're talking like 10 to 12 wins per season, but you kind of want to see a little bit more playoff success. You kind of want to see them take advantage of this Super Bowl window because this is a very talented team with like some studs, whether it's like CeeDee Lamb on offense or Dak Prescott being like a top 5, top 7 quarterback in the NFL, or like Micah Parsons, who you can argue is one of, if not the best defensive player in the NFL. So it's like, okay, you have these weapons, you have these guys at your disposal. We want to see you get better production and have better success. Not even necessarily production, but success from a wins standpoint. So it's going to be a very fascinating year with Mike McCarthy. If you're unfamiliar with Mike McCarthy, he was the Packers head coach for about 13 years. Prior to that, he was offensive coordinator for teams like the Niners and the Saints. He's very much like a West Coast offense in terms of his like offensive philosophy. But with the addition of Brian Schottenheimer last season, I thought things kind of like took a turn for the better. And it's kind of funny because McCarthy kind of comes from, well, he comes from Brian's dad's coaching tree, Marty Schottenheimer. And Brian, I love what he implemented to McCarthy's offense, whether it was a lot more motion, play action, but not just play action for the sake of play action, but play action from a variety of different personnel usages, whether it's in shotgun, whether it's in like under center and like single back, stuff like that. Like you saw him come out in a variety of different personnels and really, really take advantage of just what the defense was giving them and keeping the defense on ice skates. He brings a little bit of that Eric Coryell type of like pass attack where they want to attack down the field, but also take advantage of those intermediate routes towards the middle of the field, which they did very effectively with CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb, one of the best receivers in all of football. So like I just love what Brian Schottenheimer did here in terms of just kind of evolving the system that was already there. And you saw great success as this team was 10th in run efficiency. This team was second in passing game efficiency. This was just a very, very good offense. It truly, truly was. If you're unfamiliar with Brian Schottenheimer, he was with the squad back in 2022 as I think a coach and analyst. Prior to that, he was the passing game coordinator for the Jaguars, and he also had stints as a offensive coordinator with teams like the Seahawks, Rams, and Jets. He's also been a quarterback coach around the league with teams like the Colts, Chargers, and Washington. So like again, I just love what Schottenheimer came in and how he was able to evolve this this team offensively. And it still may have been like Mike McCarthy calling the plays. That's fine. But just to adapt the way you do things, I like that. I like McCarthy's willingness to do that. Like sometimes with these more veteran head coaches, they're kind of like set in their ways, and it's like it's either my way or the highway. But the ability to adapt, I thought was pretty darn huge. Not to say Mike McCarthy was without his criticisms, which I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to some of the other guys in the coaching staff. But let's move to the defense. You got a new DC coming in as Dan Quinn, now the head coach over at Washington. You bring in Mike Zimmer, a guy that's been a DC around the NFL for a hell of a long time. He was formerly an analyst and consultant for the Colorado Buffaloes and Jackson State with Deion Sanders. But before that, he was the Vikings head coach. Prior to that, he was a DC for teams like the Bengals, the Falcons, the Cowboys. So now he returns to the Cowboys. He spent 12 years with the Cowboys. And when it comes to what he's going to do schematically, I put multiple fronts here because he's going to show you a hell of a lot of different looks. Like, for the most part, this is going to probably be like a 4-3 front, like base formation, but like, he attacks it in a variety of different ways. Like with like mug fronts. Like he'll bring his linebackers, line them up in the A gap, and just give you the looming threat that they may blitz. Like, and he's not someone that is gonna bring extra pressure. Like that's not his game. He tries to generate pressure by making you not know where it's coming from. Like we've seen in his past, like we've seen like a 3-3 fire zone, essentially, where they just like pull a defensive lineman into like underneath coverage, and they send maybe like a linebacker or like the slot corner. They bring in just a different defender to come in and bring that pressure. And then if he's gonna bring these mug fronts, you're always gonna be fearing the A gap. So it's like, okay, are we gonna need to bring extra protection just to make sure that this doesn't hit home? And on top of that, like Zimmer, he is very good at stopping the run. His teams have been very good over the course of his career as a DC or a head coach at stopping the run. In terms of coverage, we've seen a bit nuance when it comes to Mike Zimmer. But for the most part, you're almost always dealing with press, whether that's press man, whether that's like cover 3 match. We've seen him dabble in quarters coverage as well. But for the most part, I think it's safe to assume it's going to be cover 3. It's going to be man coverage. Those are probably going to be like in like the 30th percentile in terms of how often he calls it, while quarters will probably hover around that 20%. But regardless, like I think Zimmer's a good coach, but he's only signed a 1-year deal. So like more than ever, this has felt kind of like a make or break year for the coaching staff. So it's going to be very fascinating in Dallas what happens, not just less during the regular season and more so the postseason and then the off season. Because like I think the Cowboys are going to be a really good team. They're always a good team during the regular season. The question is, will that translate to postseason success, and what will happen during the off season? That's honestly kind of what I'm looking forward to, seeing what happens here with the coaching staff. And of course, you can see my grades for the coaching, whether it's the run game or the passing game, both offensive and defense. So let's jump to the actual coaching staff and look at some of the just the other like position coaches here. As let's start with this. Let's start with, you got Ryan Feder, who is the assistant quarterbacks coach as well as the game management coach. Mike McCarthy last season, like he's known for his blunders when it comes to game management. We saw that a couple of times, whether it was late in the Detroit game where, hey, you could have done a better job of ticking down the clock. You could even go to the Seattle game and be like, they were, I think, at least around the red zone. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they were essentially in scoring position. I think they were in the red zone, and they had the option of just running on third down, take some time away. Instead, they take a shot at the end zone. And I get it, going for that kill shot, but just go with the safer alternative and put it on the back, put the game on the back of this defense, who was, in terms of efficiency, 7th against the pass and 6th against the run. Like, you don't have to take that kill shot. You don't. So, hey, and I get it, like, during that game, it's not like the defense played really good. You had Deron Bland getting toasted a couple of times by DK Metcalf, but still, but Feder is going to be a guy that will have his say in some of those calls. Ultimately, it's Mike McCarthy and what he wants to do, but again, that's kind of like the big criticism when it comes to Mike McCarthy, his game management. You also have down here where you had Mike Solari as the offensive lines coach. He's done a phenomenal job with that offensive line. They've been able to develop talent. So them taking someone like Tyler Guyton, and I'm really excited about Cooper Beebe, and I'm even excited for Brock Hoffman because I really think he's going to get a go. We'll find out more during training camp, but I really do think he's going to get a go at center, and Cooper Beebe might end up like the heir apparent at right guard for Zach Martin. And then you got Scott Tolzien as the quarterback's coach. He's done a good job with Dak, former Wisconsin quarterback. So I love to see it. I love seeing these guys who, for the most part, Tolzien was a backup in the NFL, but not like a high-end backup or anything. But I just love seeing that. It's fun seeing players that I recognize now on coaching staffs. It's just a good time. Going to the defense, you have Paul Guenther. I think that's how you say it, but he's been around the league for a minute. He was a Raiders DC at some point. He's the defensive run coordinator, so just a very experienced guy in there to help call some of the, or at least provide some wisdom to this defense. Al Harris has been around here for a while. He's got a long history with Mike McCarthy. He's the assistant head coach and defensive backs coach. He's done a great job. It always seems like someone, like, it doesn't matter who's playing safety, that you're going to get good safety play from the Cowboys. Kind of the running joke is that this team doesn't really care about drafting safety because they can really bring whoever in there and have them play well. Like, let's be honest, like Malik Hooker kind of revitalized his career coming to Dallas. And you've seen guys like Trevon Diggs, Deron Bland kind of like step up, play big for this squad. Especially with Bland. I think he was like a 5th or a 6th round player and just kind of had his coming out party last year because initially it was like, okay, he's going to be a really good slot for this team. And then he moves outside because you had the Diggs injury and it's like, holy crap, dude. You're telling me this guy could play both inside and outside? Golly. You also have Darian Thompson. You might be familiar with him as a former safety in the NFL. I believe he went to Boise State, but he was a safety with the Cowboys for a little bit. He's the assistant linebackers coach here, as shouldn't be surprising as when it comes to the Cowboys, they've kind of blended the two where they like their 3 safety sets. They don't mind putting a safety in the box opposed to a linebacker. So guys like Jerron Kearse, who, I mean, the guy's meaty, it makes sense, but last year they did it with Bell coming in at like 218, and he played really well. So I think he's done a good job and probably due to like get a good promotion within this coaching staff at some point. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about this roster. As per usual, you'll see my grades for each position group over here. Some people might not like that I have Dak Prescott as a B+ grade. To be fair, that includes the backups. But to be fair, the starting quarterback is a large majority of the grade. And it's just when I give out those A grades, it's for guys that I truly think are elite at the position. And I feel like Dak Prescott is more so on the outside looking in. He's more akin to like your Jalen Hurts, your Justin Herberts, Matthew Staffords, guys like that. So like, I'm not going to mince words. Like, Dak is hella good. Truly is. Like last season, 38 big time throws, 36 touchdowns all during the regular season, only 14 turnover worthy plays. Like, he was relatively safe with the football. I know he had some costly turnovers. Like, you look at like the end of that Cardinals game. But they, for the most part, were few and far in between. And I felt like last season, because this is the thing with Dak, he's typically relatively fine when it comes to turnover worthy plays. It's just like he goes through like spurts where it's like a lot of his turnover worthy plays didn't result in turnovers. And I feel like at least the last couple of years, more so those turnover worthy plays have resulted in turnovers. Like you go to last season, you had 18 turnover worthy plays, then 15 interceptions. So a lot of those ended up, in fact, being turnovers. But to be fair, this season was probably the most safe he was with the football, and 14 of those ended up turning into 9 interceptions. Like, Dak was hella good, man. He was hella good. A 77.6 adjusted completion percentage that basically takes out spikes, throwaways, drops, gives you the truest sense of how accurate a quarterback is on the throw-to-throw basis. He was really accurate. He was among the best in the league, the best in football. So like, let's not take anything away from Dak, and he's still got his legs. He's still got the mobility. A guy that he's not just someone that could extend the play with his legs, but truly can be a threat with his legs. He had that like 20-some yard touchdown run against the Chargers this season. So Dak is still hella good. The other part where people might be a little mad at is I have weapons listed as a C+, and essentially what weapons are pass catchers for me. I have a whole running back position group, and then weapons is just who are the pass catchers, whether it's wide receivers, tight ends, or running backs. And this is one of the worst running back groups in the league, as you can tell by my D- grade. But when it comes to the pass catchers, CeeDee Lamb could only do so much. Like, there's a lot of just fine guys past him. Like, I like the group. I don't love the group. And then it's like, how much is he really getting from his running backs in the passing game? Like the tight ends, it's a little bit more nice there with like Jake Ferguson kind of having the breakout season last year. I feel good about like Peyton Hendershot. Luke Schoonmaker's coming into year 2. So like this is a team that likes 12 personnel. So like I feel good about that. Just good, not great when it comes to like their actual pass catchers. And I mean, let's just talk about CeeDee Lamb, who is freaking wonderful. Lined up last season, only 57% of the time in the slot, but he was put in motion a hell of a lot and created a lot of mismatches. Ended up having over 1,700 yards last season, 12 touchdowns, one of the best wide receivers in football. And be fair, the Cowboys did manage to hold on to their top 3 pass catchers last year, being Lamb, Jake Ferguson, and then Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks might be more in the twilight of his career, as it's hard to believe that he's been around the league for so long, but a guy that's been so good for so many different teams around the NFL. But now I feel like he's more in that you are truly kind of this like mid-level wide receiver 2 among the bunch. Like, I mean, if you go to his past, like look at how many different teams he had over 1,000 yards with, like the Saints, the Patriots. You had, I believe this is the Rams, the Texans. Like, man, Brandon Cooks has been good for a long time. Like, low key, like you look over the course of his career, he's probably at least going to get close to breaking 10,000 receiving yards this season. He's got 57 career touchdowns. He like low key, man. He's put up a hell of a good career, and I just wanted to give a little shine to him. He worked out of the slot only 35% of the time, so I do think CeeDee Lamb will be their lead slot receiver. Though, I mean, of course, you have Turbin, who, when he's on the field, he's going to be a majority of the time in the slot, but he is really role/package specific. They want to get crazy with jet sweeps and whatnot. That's kind of his role in this team, so he's not going to see nearly as many snaps as your starting guys. And then I put Jalen Tolbert here, and I truly do think that third wide receiver for the Cowboys is kind of up for grabs somewhat. I do sense that they really hope this will be the breakout year for Jalen Tolbert. Last season ended only having 35 receptions, 268 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I really like Tolbert coming out of South Alabama. It's just hasn't really transitioned to actual production. In terms of maybe guys that can unseat him, like it's not going to be Turbin because he's pretty, like I said, role specific. But like maybe Jalen Brooks, who's more akin to what they had in Michael Gallup, where he's like bigger vertical type of threat. But then Ryan Flournoy, I think, could maybe play into this, as we'll talk about the depth that they have, at least some of the guys that maybe could end up sticking to the roster. Because I think that wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6 is a bit more up for grabs than some people may think. But I'm just gonna go with the guy that's been here a bit longer in Jalen Tolbert, that they invested a bit more in, because like I said, a 3rd round pick. And then Jake Ferguson having the breakout year last year, 5 touchdowns, over 700 yards. I liked Ferguson coming out of Was it Wisconsin? It was a red school. I think it was Wisconsin, but I remember him coming out, man. He felt like Dalton Schultz. It was Wisconsin. He felt like Dalton Schultz, so much like Dalton Schultz. And I think he's essentially become the Dalton Schultz of this squad. But like really when it comes to pass catchers, like they keep their top 3, but then past that, it's like you lose Tony Pollard, who was such a vital threat as a receiving back. And I know last year was kind of a down year for him in terms of his production, but still, even prior to that, like his role as a receiving back was hella good. He was like the 5th leading receiver on this squad. Gallup's no longer here. Who's going to step up and take that production? Will it be Tolbert? Can it be? I don't know. We shall see. I do have Dottle being the lead back. Keep in mind when I say offensive starters, these are just the guys that I think are going to get the most snaps. I think a lot of people get that confused in the comment section, specifically when it comes to the defense. They'll see like, oh, what? Man, no, our nose tackle is this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but how often do you really have that like zero tech on the field? I'm looking at the guys that are going to be on the field the most because that's really going to dictate how well your team does, so yeah, keep that in mind. Again, these are lead snap getters, but I'm going with Dottle. Again, a guy last year who kind of cemented himself as the running back too. Zeke comes back, but again, in the twilight of his career, you might have a couple of other guys like Deuce Vaughn. They bring in Royce Freeman. You got Malik Davis, who's been here for a little bit, who can maybe contend in that committee, but I think this is Dottle's going to be the lead snap getter when it comes to the running back room. And then we go to the offensive line. And probably the first place I want to talk about is center, because some people might have Cooper Beebe. I'm going to go with my boy Brock Hoffman. He's been able to stick around since being a UDFA. And I was a big fan of Hoffman coming out of Virginia Tech. I had him as like a 6th, 7th round pick. He ends up going as a UDFA, and to be fair, the guy doesn't have a lot of starting experience or even real game experience to his name. I mean, if we're gonna go look, he played 222 snaps last season, and I thought he was pretty solid. But over the course, last year was his first year with the Cowboys, so I just think with him being the veteran body, and they don't really have another center on here, like a true center. Like Cooper Beebe, again, not a true center, a guy that played left tackle then left guard at Kansas State. I think they probably go with Hoffman as the starter, with maybe Cooper Beebe either being developed to be the heir apparent to Zach Martin, or maybe if things don't go well with Hoffman, that he could step in. But it's nice to get Beebe reps at center, because then it gives him some versatility if injury hits, which it has in the past for the Cowboys. And then the other new name you really need to talk about here is Tyler Guyton. I kind of already touched on him when we were talking about the draft. Someone who I think is going to try to or at least he's in year one, he's going to largely get by because of his physical and athletic tools. So maybe what to expect is maybe like a Braxton Jones type of year, at least Braxton Jones, his rookie season. But that was also someone who was toolsy, viewed very much as a developmental prospect, ends up going, I think, in like the 4th round to the Bears coming out of Southern Utah. So like Guyton, that's my expectation. It was like, okay, let's see if he can play up to this standard. So there's my expectation when it comes to Guyton, but someone who has the tools to be someone very special, just needs a lot of development. Of course, you have Tyler Smith, who's this all-pro guard, and I honestly thought they could probably kick him in tackle and feel a-okay. I know some people were like, well, why settle for a really good guard instead of a great, or a really good tackle instead of a great guard? And it's like, well, because tackle is more valuable. But yeah, I mean, regardless, like Smith, he's great. He's probably their best offensive lineman right now as it stands. When it comes to guard, you have Zach Martin still there, still under contract. They could rework things and if they want to, and maybe make him a cap casualty next year if they feel really good about BB. But I think he's got 2 more years on his deal as it stands now. Zach Martin currently is 33 going on 34, so he is getting up there in years, but the play is still pretty darn solid. It's not what it used to be, but he is still, I think, easily their second best player on that offensive line. He's still playing at a really, really high level. And then you have Terrence Steele, who is coming off a bit of a down season. Steele just as a pass protector wasn't good last year. Just wasn't. And it's funny. It was like right after getting paid too. Because you look at the years prior, it's like, I get it. He wasn't like he was more run blocker than actual pass protector, but still he was relatively like really solid. Like you look at 2022 where he only allowed 20 pressures, 1 sack. This past season, that jumped to 54 pressures, 8 sacks. Granted, played a bit more snaps, but like not that much for it to go up that much. So you're kind of hoping he could rebound because, to be fair, his 2021-2022 season were much, much better. So you're hoping to see him bounce back. He had some rough games in there, like against Philly. That first game against Philly allowed 4 sacks, 12 pressures. He had a game against San Francisco where he allowed 8 pressures, 1 sack. So like he had some like 2 really, really bad games last year. So again, you're just kind of hoping for the bounce back when it comes to Terrence Steele. But this is one of the better offensive lines in football, even if there are some question marks here and there. Let's talk about it in depth. Let's just keep with the offensive line. As if injury hits, I feel like Chuma Edoga is probably the next guy up. He was here with the Cowboys last season, I believe, as a like a swing tackle / backup, played 420 snaps. Someone who's probably going to be the first guy in if injury does hit. But they also, and I like Edoga. I think he's probably one of the better backup players in the NFL. Is he a full starter? No, definitely not. But I think he's a solid backup. Behind him, we will talk about you got Matt Waltzko. I probably butchered that name. I'm sorry. Someone who they drafted out of North Dakota in 2022. Very much a developmental guy. Earl Bostick, who was a UDFA out of Kansas. You can make an argument for Nathan Thomas, who played tackle at Louisiana, or even a Sim Richards, who can kick out. I mean, Josh Ball, a guy that's been here since 2021, coming out of Marshall, formerly of Florida State, who was more of a toolsy guy that they've been developing, but nothing much has come from it. So I don't think it matters. Probably doesn't make the squad, just because I think there's other guys I'd rather keep on the roster there. But yeah, it's very much going to be Edoga. He's also going to operate as like the 6th offensive lineman. Though I think Cooper Beebe could also, well, that's not true. Nah. Cooper Beebe comes in if there's injuries along that interior, and I won't want to see Cooper Beebe at tackle in the NFL. Like, Edoga's got the much better movement skills. When it comes to the guard position, TJ Bass, Sim Richards, I actually like Richards quite a bit, and I'm really excited to see maybe potentially a bit more of him. Not necessarily this season, but just like if he has to step in, I'm very eager to see him in preseason play. So I think he could develop into a high-end backup for the Cowboys. I think I liked him the best among those North Carolina prospects coming out of 2023. I think it was like Ezidu. The Giants guys, because you had the Giants, like, not draft. Well, they drafted Joe, but the other one I think was a UDFA, but both of them ended there. I honestly thought Richards was the best one. He had a solid Senior Bowl. But you also have, again, they list Josh Ball as a tackle slash guard. Nathan Thomas is listed as a guard here, but can play tackle at Louisiana. TJ Bass, someone who's just been around the league. He's got the most starting experience, or he's got the most game experience under his belt. But yeah, all these guys I think are really good fits for the blocking scheme, whether they want to go like outside zone, inside zone, wham bam duo, stuff like that. I think all these guys kind of fit that. They are multi-use, that they're not really scheme dependent when it comes to that. Let's talk about the tight ends real quick, because I mentioned Peyton Hendershot. I'm actually a big fan of. I liked him coming out of, I think it was Indiana. And him and Jake Ferguson, when Dalton Schultz was still around back in 2022, they all looked really good. It looked like, oh yeah, no kidding. Let's go ahead, let Schultz just go ahead and test the waters. We feel really good about these two tight ends. And then they come out in 2023 and they use a second round pick on Luke Schoonmaker. So they just kind of replenish the tight end position. I don't know why they have John Stevens listed as the tight end 3 here. I like Hendershot, and I like Hendershot, and I like him quite a bit more. But Stevens, I think, will be actively going for that tight end 4 role if they hold on to a 4th tight end. But there's a good case where Brevin Spanford, who's just got kind of ridiculous size and really good straight line speed at that size, could make the team again if they hold on to a 4th tight end. Let's talk about some of the other pass catchers, because I think it's an interesting group. Once you get past Cooks, Lamb, Tolbert, and then Turpin, you look at who's the wide receiver 5, and you probably say Jalen Brooks, though I think Ryan Flournoy is a bit more fluent in terms of what he provides. He's a bit more all around, while Brooks, I think, is more, probably vertical, gives you a little possession type of receiver vibes, good size. I think Flournoy should be in that discussion. Couldn't tell you much about Tyron Billy Johnson. I didn't watch him last year out of Ohio State. Ended up being like a UDFA in the 2023 class. He's listed here as someone who could potentially make the roster. I don't know much about him. Jalen Cropper has been really popping up in training camp. He's had a couple of really, really nice just routes ran and nice after the catch ability, like good speed. This dude was a very fluid athlete coming out of Fresno State. I really liked him. I kind of worried that he was more of a slot only player. So I don't know if that lack of versatility and his lack of ability to potentially play on the outside probably hurts him. So he's probably looking at the practice squad. You got a couple of guys like, okay, David Durden, he's fine, but he's probably a practice squad guy. Another one who just doesn't have that speed, more of a possession type. You have a couple of guys that are more special teamers than actual receivers in Kelvin Harmon at this point in his career. Racey McMath is actually a pretty good special teamer. Like, he's a really good gunner, and that's how he's going to stick to a roster. That's the only way this man sticks to a roster, if he gets held on for simply being a gunner for this squad. So it's really just what to look out for there. I kind of give the nod to Flournoy. Again, a little bit biased. He was kind of a my guy. I kind of give the nod to Flournoy. Just, again, a guy that's a fluid route runner, a good, not great athlete, but sure hands, attacks the catch point well, has shown after the catch ability, showed that going to the Senior Bowl that he could step up when the competition gets better. He showed that he belonged. Big fan of Flournoy, so he's going to be the guy I'm rooting for there. And then let's talk about the running back room, because it's a freaking, not nightmare, but it's just, I don't feel great about it. Like, you look at, okay, you got Rico Dowdle, and it's like, okay, well, what should we expect here when it comes to Dowdle? And it's not too different than what, like, if you were complaining about what Tony Pollard did last season in an off year for him, then you're not going to be getting much different when it comes to Dowdle and his upside. That's the thing. His upside. Like, his upside was Tony Pollard's down year. Is like, let's just go ahead and let's take a gander at it. As you had in terms of yards per carry or per attempt, Pollard had 4, Dottle 4.1. You had yards after contact on average, Pollard 2.92. You typically, like, on average, you want that above 3, but it's not entirely necessary. The best guys in the league will be around that, closer to 4. But you had Pollard at 2.92. You had Dottle 2.91. In terms of force missed tackles, they weren't that much different. Heck, I would argue that Tony Pollard was much better at forcing missed tackles, though he was in a down year when it came to him forcing missed tackles. Like, Dottle's very much someone who can't create something from nothing, while Pollard, I thought, had that ability. Dottle is like, if you give him daylight, he will rip off chunks. That is who he is. In terms of what he brings to the passing game, it's fine. It's not the level of Pollard, but it kind of is what it is. And then you look at Freeman, and Freeman's literally, in terms of what he did last year, it's literally Dottle. 4.1 yards per attempt, 2.91 yards after contact. The force missed tackle ability is a bit better just because, well, Freeman's a bruiser. I mean, he's packing about 15 extra pounds, and honestly probably has a little bit better long speed. Just kind of nuts, but you're definitely getting a better pass catcher when it comes to Dottle. And then, of course, we got to talk about Ezekiel Elliott. He's in the twilight of his career, and not much should be expected for him. I don't know why, like, our lads lists him as the starter, but to be fair, it's kind of up for grabs like that. But last season, averaged 3.5 yards per attempt. Yards after contact, 2.54. Again, not getting it done as a runner anymore, really. But he was a really good pass catcher. Had 313 receiving yards. So if anything, I think he ends up being like the pass catching option here for the Cowboys. And I mean, you look at his pass protecting, where I thought he was relatively okay. But again, nothing special. We got to shout out Deuce Vaughn. He's kind of like, he is like, if you want a pass catcher, that's who it is, right? Because he's undersized, like really undersized, super undersized. But you know, he's got that home run threat, big playmaking ability if you get him out in space. The question is, will they ever have that confidence to actually give him a healthy volume as a pass catcher in this offense? And I kind of lean towards probably not. Malik Davis is a bit more to the same of what they have in guys like Dottle and Freeman. So I think he's probably on the outside looking in. Snoop Connor is a bit more to the same of what they have in Davis and Freeman and Dottle outside looking in. Nathaniel Pete, I don't recall. I remember him putting him down coming out of Missouri. Okay, I remember putting him down in my draft guide. I just didn't get to an eval with him. He was stuck behind Cody Schrader. But like, I think some of his analytics were kind of like, ooh, okay, it's not half bad, but probably a big long shot to make the squad. When it comes to backup quarterback, they list Cooper Rush as the current backup, but I've heard some good things about Trey Lance in camp. And keep in mind, Trey Lance, he was a former 3rd overall pick. So perhaps, maybe he's viewed as the heir apparent if like they decide not to hold on to Dak after this season. Because keep in mind, again, McCarthy, 1 year left. Mike Zimmer, 1 year left. Dak Prescott, 1 year left. Is he going to get hit free agency? I don't know. I think at this point, like, you got to feel like that offense is good enough to have playoff success. It really is. So, like, do you really want to, like, start over and try to get younger at quarterback? This isn't exactly, like, the draft class to do it in. At least as it stands now, I don't think there's a top 10 a quarterback worth the top 10 selection. Not that that's where the Cowboys will be drafted anyway. They're going to be more so in the back end of that first round, which, okay, do you still feel good about a quarterback you spent a back end of the first round pick on? Probably not. So it's like, I would just run it again with Dak, and just give them money. Like, they're going to have money to work with next off season. And I feel like, I honestly think they should probably just bring back Dak. But like, also you got like what, CeeDee Lamb's contract, Micah Parsons. So I get it. They got to pay guys. It's going to be tough for the Cowboys, but regardless, I think this offense is hella good. It was among the top in the league last year. The overall grade might be a bit low. Kind of is what it is, because again, like the run game, I'm kind of like, is it going to be good? Like, is it going to be good enough? You got some new faces on the offensive line, so will there be a little bit of a learning curve there? So, like, the passing game is going to be good. Passing game is going to be good. But will the run game, will it drop from that 10th overall in efficiency and maybe be more around that, like, bottom of the league, maybe like 20th, 25th? So that's kind of where that C+ overall comes in. I know a lot of people will be like, look at how crazy this offense was last year. Well, they lost some significant parts, and now they're going to be relying on some relatively unproven talent. So I don't know. Maybe we can meet in the middle when it comes to that. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about this defense. And when it comes to this defense, yes, it is in fact good. Should shock nobody. Yes, it comes with its questions, as any defense does. But I think from like position to position, player to player, this is one of the best defenses in all of football. This is why I got them with an A+ overall. They're in that tier where I think they're among the elite, the best of the league when it comes defensively. And yeah, it's kind of helped by Micah Parsons being one of the best defenders in the NFL. Had 103 pressures last season, 16 sacks. That's via PFF. When it comes to his pressure rate, his win rate, 24.1%. That was among the best in the NFL. He is hella good. And you know what? DeMarcus Lawrence is still playing good football across from him, though I do think they're probably going to get off his contract in the next, whether it's next season or the year after. I don't know what his contract looks like, but he is someone that is starting to get up there in years, as he is, I say up there in years, he's kind of already there at like, what, 32? Yeah, 32. He'll be 33 by the end of the NFL season. So that's why you're kind of looking to get younger at the position, why they've went out and got guys like not just Sam Williams or Marshawn Nealon, but also last season they drafted Valami Fehoko, which we'll talk about him too when we get to the depth. But still, DeMarcus Lawrence is playing really good football. Had a pass rush win percentage of 15%, 48 pressures, 4 sacks during the regular season. Solid, good numbers. You go to the interior, Osa Odighizuwa was my guy coming out of that, what was it, 2022? 2021 NFL draft. Liked him coming out of UCLA, bit undersized, but a guy that was like, man, he's going to go and get after it. And fun fact, he indeed did that. 43 pressures, 3 sacks. He had a win rate of 14.1%, which is really good on the interior. That's pretty darn solid. And I feel like he's improved year after year as a run defender, someone that can stay on the field for all 3 downs. So you're looking really good. The question comes with, Mozzie Smith. Is he going to be good this year? Because like he was supposed to be kind of this like size and speed like marvel, you know, like someone that's like, oh wow, like just rare quicks for the position. And his testing was like, okay, it's not nearly as like pumped up as it should. Like it was far too hyped. As like he tested, I thought relatively fine for his size. But then he sheds some weight last year, and I mean he ends up being on the field for 300 snaps and was just not a good run defender. He wasn't the guy that I felt like I saw when watching him in 2020. I guess that'd be the 2022 season. Ends up going to the 2023 draft. He wasn't the same guy as a run defender. He was someone that like from sideline to sideline would go and get after, a guy that can chase you down. Someone who played with a big motor and was very stout at the point of attack. I didn't see any of that last year from him. So you're kind of hoping, especially from a first round player, that he takes that next jump up. But I do think the rotation's really good. along the, I say really good. Yeah, no, it's really good along the defensive line. Let's kind of jump into it. As we're going to stick with the interior, Chauncey Goldston, low key, has been one of the better rotation players in football. Last season ended up having 19 pressures and 2 sacks. But I mean, if you look at his win percentage, like he won on 53 or 15.3% of the time. That was good for second best on the team last season. Like very much a pass rusher. Very much not going to be someone you want stopping the football. Coming out of Iowa, he was a bit more of this tweener. And I think if you use him in that fashion, which, hey, in Mike Zimmer's scheme, you're going to see a few different fronts. Then, yeah, you're going to have a good time with him. They do have some big boys back there that can be, quote unquote, guys that eat space, with one being Justin Rogers out of Auburn this past season. Talked about him when we went over the draft, but coming in at like 340 pounds, but really just a space eater. There wasn't anything on tape where I was like, oh wow. It was just like, okay, someone with your body type, you're probably gonna get drafted because there's just not a lot of guys that can do that in the NFL. They also have Carl Davis, who's another one that's like 330 pounds, coming out of Iowa, who's a space eater. So they're probably just going to keep whoever's the better between the two. They're probably hoping Rodgers, since they spent a draft pick on him, but it was a 7th round draft pick. When it comes to the edge room, big hit with Sam Williams tearing his ACL and MCL, but this just, I think, allows their 2nd round pick, Marshawn Kneeland, to eat. I love Kneeland. He's a guy that I think could play all 3 downs. Like, he was a very, very solid edge defender when it came to the run game at Western Michigan, and the dude showed up and played really well at the Senior Bowl. I loved it. I loved him. So we're going to see a lot more of him this season just because of that injury. We might see maybe Viliami Fehoko last year. Basically, he had, I think, a knee injury last season. That basically meant he didn't play last year. So I liked him coming out of San Jose State. Someone who needed to definitely develop his game, but I'm very curious to see if he ends up getting in on this rotation. But they brought in guys who have been, at least they have a little bit more experience to them. For one, in Alquadin Muhammad, who you'll probably remember him from like the Colts. They brought him in. Shaka Toney, who was, I believe, the Commanders. I know it was an NFC East team, and I'm drawing a blank on the top of my head. But they brought in guys that have actual game time experience. If anything, I think Muhammad, he's going to be the guy that makes the roster. You just get that veteran presence. You got guys like Tyrus Wheat, Darrell Johnson, who are more DPR type of guys, which are designated pass rush only. They aren't players that can set the edge or play the run well. They're just not. They never were in college. With Tyrus Wheat kind of being like a tweener between edge and linebacker, whether it was at Mississippi State or Michigan State. And then Johnson just wasn't good against the run at Maryland. He was simply go and get the quarterback. Maybe one of those guys makes the team. I mean, we did see playing time last year. How much playing time? I mean, it was 21 snaps. What am I saying? Saw playing time. Was it 21 snaps? Was it really only 21? 32 snaps, excuse me. But neither of these guys are really good tacklers. You don't want them playing in the run game. Like, and if anything, if you're going to keep kind of like a DPR, it's probably going to be more so like a Shaka Toney. Byron Vaughns, I couldn't really tell you much about. Didn't follow him during the draft process. When it comes to the linebackers, this is a very good group, not just from a starter perspective, but also the depth. Let's start with the starters, as Eric Hendricks, the most familiar with Mike Zimmer's scheme. His peak years were under Mike Zimmer. Might not be the same player he once was. He's starting to enter the twilight of his career, and we really seen that in terms of coverage, where he's allowed a 78% completion rate, but at the same time, he's very much a minimal gain guy, which honestly, if you could get that from your linebackers, then you probably feel really good. By minimal gain, I mean, hey, sure, you might catch the football underneath on me, but those 4 to 5 to 6 yards are going to be the only yards you gain, as he had a 6% missed tackle rate last year. But more importantly, he knows what Zimmer likes in terms of, hey, this is what we need to do as a blitzers, trying to get those straight shots to the quarterback while shooting the A gaps. So you could probably extend that knowledge to guys like, well, Clark. Clark, I think, is going to be very involved as a pass rusher. Or you get like Maris Luafau, who I think they bring him in just because of that blitz and upside. Like, I think last season he had like 25 pressures, 5 sacks at Notre Dame. So I think for the most part, he's going to be the guy over like a DeMarvion Overshown, who I think they're probably going to utilize more from a coverage standpoint. But we'll talk about the depth behind Clark and Kendricks. Clark very much in a similar mold as a minimal gain guy in coverage. He's not going to be someone who makes these splash plays in coverage, but he will make those stops. Like, hey, if these 4, 5, 6 yards you're going to gain underneath, they're going to be the only yards you gain from me. He had a 5.5% missed tackle rate. If anything, I'm looking to see what he can do as a blitzer, but maybe they lean a little bit more with Maris Luafau. When they do blitz, they bring him in to be the guy to shoot that A gap. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about the depth at linebacker, because I did mention it's pretty good. You have DeMarvion Overshown, who's coming off the ACL injury. This is kind of his true rookie year after having to redshirt last season because of the injury. And you get him because he was like solid against the run at Texas, just because he played relatively well around the line of scrimmage. He knew how to get nimble between tackles, but wasn't like the guy that had like he didn't have the body, the physicality. You kind of worried about that. It's more so, I think they drafted him for what he can do in coverage, as he had those splash plays in coverage over the course of his career. So I'm kind of intrigued to see how involved Overshown can get. And I kind of already mentioned with Luafau, he's probably going to be your blitzing option. This is a guy that just plays with his beautiful, beautiful hair on fire. And honestly, Damon Wilson, I think, sticks on the squad. This is actually his second stint in Dallas after finishing out his contract on his rookie deal, because he was like a 4th or 5th. I think he was a 4th round pick for Dallas back in 2015. Oh, actually, it says it right here, 4th round pick out of 2015. But after he finished up his rookie deal there, he kind of bounced around the league on like 2-year deals as like a solid replacement level starter. Like I think he did that with the Chiefs, did that with the Jags. Back in 2021, had like a career year in terms of like tackles, and more so a backup level player, really, but a good player to have on the squad, someone who's a very sure tackler. So I think he could make the roster just because of that. There are a couple of other interesting names. Well, one other interesting name I want to bring up here in Buddy Johnson. Excuse me, that's disgusting. Pardon me, guys. Whew. A little gassy. This is breakfast for me. I'm recording this Saturday in the morning. Just had some bacon and eggs. But Buddy Johnson, I really liked coming out of Mississippi State. Ended up not getting drafted, was UDFA, went to the Steelers, never really was able to work into the rotation. So kind of, I think he wasn't drafted. If anything, he was drafted in like the mid to late third round, mid to late day 3. But regardless, that's neither here or there. I really liked him coming out, man. I thought he was a sideline to sideline athlete who showed not flashes, but at least the potential to be a guy that had splash plays in coverage. Nothing's really come to like materialize with that, but just a name to shout out. Maybe watch out for, look out for him at camp. Maybe he makes a stir, but I'm pretty sure at least who the top 5 guys are when it comes to the linebacker position. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about the secondary. Golly. DaRon Bland. Like I remember after his rookie year, I had him in my surprise in rookie years, breakout players. Like, oh, this guy's gonna be a really good slot player for years to come, and then it has to get kicked out to the outside after Diggs goes down with injury. and ends up having a year to remember. Like, he had, I think, 8 interceptions in total, 5 of them returned for pick sixes. It was a magical year. Now, it's not to say it was all pretty. He had games where he got mollywopped. DK in particular, he got bodied by DK. But he was really good in coverage. I think he ended up actually finishing with 9 interceptions, 6 pass breakups, allowed a completion rate of 53.9%. Hella good. Great year. I'm not worried that he's gonna have no problem adjusting to this scheme, because there's not much to adjust for. Because I mean, you think of Dan Quinn, it was a lot of cover 3 with the occasional cover 1. So he can play man, he can play cover 3 match. Just might mean there may be a little bit more press coverage. Like, again, it's very similar coverage wise to what Quinn was already doing. So it's going to be fine. Unfortunately, you had Trevon Diggs coming off injury. It was also an ACL injury very early in the season. I think it was like week 2 against the Jets. But we know who he is. Like, this is a guy that is a straight up ball hawk. He's got that ability to make big plays around the football. Just let's go look a little bit in the past, because to be fair, he's kind of become a bit, not conservative, but he's kind of reeled back on just going after the ball and trying to play more of a disciplined type of game, not this whole I see ball, I get ball type of mentality. Like, you look at last season, had 3 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, but was very, very much like, yeah, you're going to catch it underneath on me, but we're going to battle downfield. I think he, in terms of his percentage, like catches underneath, it was pretty high, but still relatively fine. The year before, you had like him allowing like 5 touchdown passes, but 11 interceptions, like true ball hawk. If anything, last year, he got much better at playing the run. Not last year, but 2022. You know what I meant. You know what I mean. He got much better at playing the run. And I mean, to be fair, I get it. The first 2 games last season, it was Zach Wilson. It was Daniel Jones. And especially that Daniel Jones game. It was in the rain. It was terrible. But it looked like it was going to be just a rinse and repeat performance from him. Like, in that Jets game, he was thrown at 5 times, didn't allow a reception. He had a pass breakup. He had an interception. Trevon Diggs deserves to be talked about among like the top 10 to 15 corners in football. Is he a top 10 guy? I don't know. I have to go and look. Like, there's a lot of good corners in football nowadays. But like, if he's not, he's definitely fringe. This is one of the best cornerback duos in the NFL. Straight up. When you get to Jordan Lewis, he is a very adequate, like, I would argue, replacement level starter at the corner position. Like, he's very much just okay. Last season, allowed a completion rate of 70% from the slot, which, keep in mind, in the slot, you're going to be allowing a much higher completion rate just because you're going to get thrown at a ton. But still, you would like that a little bit lower, but allowed 4 touchdowns, only had 1 interception, 4 pass breakups, allowed 548 yards. When it comes to what he does stopping the run, it's good. He's definitely better in that regard. A 7% missed tackle rate's pretty solid. So, like, maybe you're looking for a little bit more oomph when it comes to what he can do on coverage. But to be fair, like last year, you had Stephon Gilmore, you had Trevon Diggs for 2 games, but you had Bland. Like, they have to target somebody, and everyone knew Jordan Lewis was going to be that weak link just because, oh yeah, we're not going to throw Mr. Pick Six's way or Stephon Gilmore, who at this age is still shut down. Bring him back. I mean, I guess you don't necessarily have to, because what does he do at that point? You just kick Deron Bland back into the slot? Like, I think you could. I think you could get fun with that, but Yeah, Jordan Lewis, I call him adequate, and I feel like he gets a bad rap. But like he's solid. He's solid. I'm not gonna dog on him too much. I would say he's like a top 20 starter in the slot in the NFL. Which, if you have one of those, I think you're feeling really good. It's a starting position in the NFL. The safeties get real involved in this system, similar to Dan Quinn's system. So I feel like we're going to see a lot of not just your starters here in Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson, but I think we're going to see a lot of Marquise Bell, maybe him playing even a bit linebacker like he did last year, because keep in mind, linebacker just gets lighter every year. But even a Wanye Thomas, as he was, granted, played just about 200 snaps last year, but he was actually pretty darn good. Hard hitter too, but hey, might have to live with some of the missed tackles just because, I mean, again, if you're going to have a more aggressive, hard-hitting style, usually the missed tackle rate's going to be a little bit higher, so that's not surprising. Even Israel, Makuma, there we go. It's been a long time since I had to say his name. If you're unfamiliar, former South Carolina corner turned safety. I think he played safety actually last year at South Carolina. Let's go ahead and just move to this depth here. He's a bit more of that box guy, though I feel like you probably just have a better version of that in Wanye Thomas. So, but like the safeties are going to be very involved, and you're going to be replacing that Jaron curse in terms of like how often they're going to play in the box. You're going to be replacing that. Shoot, how much did Donovan Wilson? Like Donovan Wilson's probably going to end up being the lead snap getter in the box then I imagine. Well, maybe Bell takes that role, but like regardless, like when it comes to Malik Hooker, I kind of already mentioned, kind of reignited his career after kind of fizzling out as a first rounder with the Colts, and he has been a hell of a good starter. Teams really don't throw his way. He does a good job of, hey, wherever he's at, the teams are throwing the opposite way in terms of wherever he is shading, you're going the other way. He does a really good job of just being that, and he's a very good run stuffer in his own right. Donovan Wilson, more run stuffer than coverage player, but underneath he has been really solid. He's made some big plays. Another guy that's pretty hard hitter, but at the same time is pretty disciplined as a tackler. Like he is a hard hitter, but not too overly aggressive to where he outruns plays or whiffs on tackles. Like the missed tackle rate, 12.6%, a little higher than where you would want it, but it's nowhere near that 18% where it's like, oh, this guy's just awful. So you like to see it. So I do think Bell's probably going to be the next guy up because he played 650 snaps last year and he was just hella good. Made 32 stops, a 6.1% missed tackle rate, really good. He was pretty darn solid in coverage in terms of he was basically functioning as a linebacker last year. What he was. They got him listed at, no, there ain't no way he's at 205. I thought he was around 218. There ain't no way. I don't know what his actual weight is, but I just remember him coming out of Florida A&M, and it was like, this is a guy you want in the box. He was good in the slot, but as a box safety coming downhill, watch out, he can make some plays. And here he is now just playing full-on linebacker. It's kind of nuts. Like, is he really 205? He can't be. He's got to be at least like 210, 215. I thought he was around that 215, 218. I don't know. Is what it is. Again, I mean, you get measured at the combine or your pro day, and that ends up being your playing weight for the rest of your life. In quotation marks, right? Let's talk about the backups here at corner, as I've heard a lot of good things about Eric Scott Jr. in training camp, and it's truly going to be a battle for who is the backup. Scott didn't play, I think, a snap last year, right? I don't remember seeing him on the field. I don't know if that was injury or if it was he was on the practice squad. Couldn't tell you. Didn't didn't look that much into it, but I did see some of the highlights from training camp. And let's talk about training camp real quick. Listen, if you hear anything negative out of training camp, take it with a grain of salt or just outright throw it away. Because, like, if it's positive, I take more away from the positive things I hear from training camp than the negatives. Because typically, people like throw these highlights of training camp and it's like, oh man, this guy got toasted in one-on-ones. And it's like, okay, for one, if you're a corner and you're going one-on-one with a receiver, you're going to lose that typically. And a lot of times, like in training camp, they're asking players to like play a certain way. Like, it's like, hey, this is how we do things here. Let's see if we can get you into that. So like a lot of this is a big learning curve. So like I've seen people like come out and like trash what they've seen from certain players. And it's like, guys, it's freaking training camp. Take it with a freaking grain of salt. Like if you hear positives, then it's like, okay. Like with last year, the Jets and I can't remember his first name. I want to say it's Jason, but it's Brownlee, the receiver out of Southern Miss. Haha, we're talking about actually another Southern Miss player here in Eric Scott, but he was a receiver out of Southern Miss. I believe he was either a late day 3 pick or a UDFA and ends up making the team. There was just a lot of positive, like how really good this guy was in camp. And people were like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to blow up. But it's like, no, he very much had a wide receiver 5 type of season. And it was just more of a shock he made the team. So it's like, take those positives, but also just take everything with a grain of salt. When people are like, well, at training camp, and I'm like, I'm going to be fair with you. I could give 2 craps about what's going on at training camp. Like, and preseason, nonetheless. It's like, guys, like, just stop. Just stop. Like, it's fun to talk about, but also let's not get out of hand with this. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Cause like, is it going to be Eric Scott? Cause he's got to be the guy that's going to be the next guy up, right? Cause for the most part, you're dealing with rookies here. Kalen Carson, I know it was round 5, should have went higher, but you're probably going to trust a guy that you've already seen a year of. You got Josh DeBerry, who was a UDFA, undersized, very much pigeonholed in the slot coming out of Texas A&M, formerly of Boston College, but very much pigeonholed in the slot, though did play a lot of outside corner. So it's not like he's got that dog in him, but not when it comes to the NFL. It's like, okay, you take that greatness you played with in college and we're going to bring it into the slot. So like, he's not going to be guys stepping up outside. No Sean Wright. Hey, fun fact, I've seen all I've needed to from him. I wasn't like a huge fan of him as a prospect coming out of Oregon State. So like, I mean, how many reps did he play last year? Like, he only played 52. Like, this is a guy that they're probably firmly out on at this point. So yeah, it's probably going to be Scott. It's probably going to be Carson. Regardless, if someone has to step up, it's going to be someone really unproven. Nonetheless, they did bring back CJ Goodwin. He missed a chunk of last season with pectoral injury. I'm unfamiliar with guys like Kamon Hall and Josh Butler. Couldn't really tell you much about them. I do want to talk a little bit about some of these safeties, like Sheldrick or Redwine, former Miami safety, like Miami Hurricanes. Very good special teamer. Long shot to make the roster. If he does, it's because of special teams. Monty Johnson, I expect to be on the practice squad. I liked him coming out of Nevada this past season. I had a priority UDFA grade on him. Dude, 6'2", 218. Maybe that's where I got the 218 from. Maybe I was just projecting on Bell. I don't know. You let me know in the comment section below, and I'm sure you're going to be very nice about it. Regardless, he's got decent length for the position, but at 218 running a 4.52, that's a really solid number. More so, it's the agility drills. 6.99, 3-cone, a 4.28, 20-yard shuttle. Those are really good agility scores for someone at 218. Now, over the course of his career, was fine. Did allow 4 touchdowns. Played a lot in the box. That's kind of where he was majority of the time there in Nevada. And at his size, yes, very much a box safety. But like, this is been the type of guys the Cowboys have invested in recent years. So, like, be on the look for Amani, man. Be on the look. Like, I saw that as a UDF fan. I was like, yo, hold the phone. Maybe a couple of years on the practice squad, and depending on what the futures of guys like Wilson and Hooker will be, maybe you see Johnson work his way into being a backup and a special teamer with this squad. So I am actually pretty excited about that. But hey, let's get to why you came here. We got done talking about the defense. We knew the defense was going to be hella good. Let's talk about how this team projects for 2024. Last year, the Cowboys had the 13th easiest schedule in football, and this year I have them with the 14th, so more middle of the pack. So let's go ahead, let's look at what potentially the ceiling for this team can be, as it will be a bit more of a tougher schedule. But let's do it, as they'll open the year in Cleveland against the Browns. That's gonna be a tough one, but I'm just gonna say I would rather bet on Dak than Deshaun Watson, both two really good defenses. That's going to be a hell of a week 1 game. Then they will go back home for their home opener, take on the Saints. Saints are very much a mediocre team, so that should be a win. Baltimore, that's going to be a bit tougher case. I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, Ravens get that one. Because remember, the Cowboys lost. Well, for one, they got blown out by a couple of these better teams like the Bills and the Niners last year. And then they played really close against teams like the Seahawks, who were above 500. The Dolphins, they lost that late second field goal. So, like, I think with the Ravens, you're dealing with maybe more of like, it could be a close game, but maybe get away from them late. They'll take on the Giants. Last year, they won both games with the Giants. And I mean, I expect the Giants to be better. So typically, the Giants and the Cowboys split games last year. Dallas got the best of them, but I mean, it was kind of a wash year for the Giants. So I'll say, let's say they do split for the sake of things. I think they could beat the Steelers coming off a mini bye as well. Detroit in Dallas. Oh, Detroit might be looking for revenge. They're coming off a bye, but I'm still going to give it to the Dallas Cowboys. Again, this one's in Dallas. And then you come out of your bye, you head back to Santa Clara to take on the Niners, where last year you got beat bad. What was it? 42-10? Yeah, 42-10. Yeah, I'm not going to give you all that game. Sorry. It's going to be a tough one. Falcons, as good as I think the Falcons can be, I do think Dallas is just overall a better team with a little bit more, honestly, to play for, considering all the guys that have 1-year deals. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I do think the Cowboys and the Eagles split. I think the Eagles ended up, they split last season, so I think that's fair to say they split this year. Texans going to be an interesting game, but it is in Dallas. I'm going to just go ahead and lean on the Cowboys winning that one. You're going to be getting Washington at home for these last few games. I think you end the year in Washington. Well, in Dallas against Washington. Washington, I think, is in a rebuild. I think it's kind of safe to say, hey, you get to face Dan Quinn, but I think it's safe to say maybe there's a good chance Dallas wins both those games. We got Bengals. It depends. Is this going to be the hurt Bengals team we saw last year, or the typical Bengals hot down the stretch team? I think it's a toss-up, and I think I'll give you the edge. Again, we're looking at the ceiling for the Cowboys currently. Carolina should be a winnable game, very winnable game. The Buccaneers should be a winnable game. Again, it got y'all splitting with the Eagles and then sweeping the Commanders. That puts y'all at 13 wins. I feel like that sounds right. This was a 12-team win last year that had a couple of close calls, close games just not go their way. So, we could even say, you know what? Let's say you sweep the Giants. 14. We're going to put your ceiling at 14 games. For my projection, I don't think necessarily things will be that easy, and I have you closer to that 12 total that you did last year. I actually have y'all at 11-6. So just under that 12-game total from last season, with the harder schedule. Keep in mind, you were 12-6 with the third easiest schedule. So I think saying 12-5, excuse me. So I think saying 11-6 with a significantly harder, not the hardest schedule in the world, but a harder schedule compared to last year, drop in maybe an extra game, I think makes sense. Like, again, I think maybe you can split right here. Like, this is a losable game. Detroit's a losable game. The Texans are a losable game. You can make an argument that Atlanta's a losable game. I'm not going to do that to y'all, but I will say the Bengals are a losable game. So, like, we take away those, and you're at 9. You're at 9. But no, I do think you come away with some of these. So let's say you sweep. Let's say you win the opener. So, bam, 11 wins. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. This is going to be a very fascinating year for the Cowboys. And let me know what you think is going to happen. Do you think Mike McCarthy's gone? Do you think Zimmer's gone? Do you think Dak's gone? And if you don't, who do you think is staying? Do you think they all stay? Like I'm saying, like, for me, I fully expect this team to make the postseason and have a really good regular season. The question is, they become very much more fascinating in terms of what happens in the postseason and how that'll dictate what happens in the off season. It's going to be very fascinating. But hey, if you want to check out some of my other deep dives, like for the Giants or the Commanders, some of your divisional rivals, or if you want maybe an early look potentially to that quarterback class next year, I have been doing a deep dive into the 2025 NFL draft. You can check out that video down here. But as always, I forgot my outro. Until next time, my friends, you be easy. Later. It wasn't even good. That wasn't even my normal outro. I butchered it. I'm sorry. I've been recording for so long. Golly, dude, I need to get some coffee in me. Y'all take care.